So how do we look at it from the Indian context? Will Ukraine, America, Europe, what do you think is going to happen in India?
First of all,
particularly because now summer is approaching. Will China do its mischief again?
no,
Because US is going to be busy here.
no. Look, we need to separate all of this.
Yes, tell me.
China will do its own thing when it wants to. Okay. China will not have its guidelines dictated by XYZ. China has to correct historical wrongs as they see it. They are an aggrieved nation as they see it, victim nation, and they have to correct historical wrongs. Their history with India is that they crushed us in 62. That is not a record that needs to be relitigated. But Vietnam defeated them in the Vietnam War, in the Vietnam-China War. My estimate is between India and Vietnam, they will choose Vietnam first to set the record right. And China does need to enter a war sometime in this decade because we're seeing what's happening with their economy. Their construction is $3 trillion of unrecoverable assets. Their entire train system that Indians are so jealous about is $1 trillion in debt. Unrecoverable. All of it is completely unrecoverable. We don't know the extent of industrial bad debt, which may be phenomenal in this particular case. They need to create this war stimulus and a war economy to re-stimulate demand. My estimate was they would choose Vietnam. But India, the messaging is so crude. Ghar mein ghus ke mara. You may not be such a threat, but you're literally upgrading your threat status for them. It's literally like when the bull wants to attack you. See, you're a fit young man. I am a middle-aged fat guy who can't move. I decide to play hero. And to prevent the bull from attacking you, I take a red cloth and say, hey, toro. Now, boss, I can't run the way you can. But this is what India is unnecessarily attracting attention.
And they're 4-5 times bigger than us.
So China listen, basically it comes down to the size of the economy.
Yeah. 5
And I keep getting abused on defensive, offensive. When I said India will last for a month, but no more than a month. It is going to be the same thing out here. You can even last for 3-4 years by throwing millions of men to die like is happening in Ukraine. The problem is industrial supply chains will always win out.
They are much better.
You depend on their economy is much bigger than you. Their manufacturing base is infinitely bigger than yours. You don't really have a manufacturing base at all. You have a backup which America and Europe will supply you. You've seen what kind of supply they do with Ukraine. Is that the backup chain you want to depend on? Are you really going up? The story of the American Civil War, where the industrial North, in spite of having inferior generals, is able to defeat the richer but agrarian South. Ukraine versus Russia, where Russian military industry is so massive it dwarfs the Ukrainian military industry. It's the same with China. Your bravery doesn't matter. Talent doesn't matter. It comes down to industrial dynamics. That is the point of industry is, see, people don't understand industrialization because you have idiots like Arfan Habib who claim the Mughal Empire was industrial. Why? Because they had 10,000 people weaving at one spot. That is not industry. Industry is the application of chemical energy to the manufacturing process. Now, technically, Abhijit will not be able to lift this table. Chitresh will be young, muscular man will be able to lift this table. But if I have an exoskeleton, which helps me lift heavy loads, Abhijit will do as good a job as Chitresh can because it's the skeleton doing the lifting. I'm just the brain providing the brains and the control. Right? It doesn't matter if a fat man sits behind a Ferrari or a thin muscular man sits behind a Ferrari. The Ferrari will still go at 300 kilometers per hour. Right? So, here this bravery doesn't matter. The only way then that you can defeat the Chinese is guerrilla warfare, where you end up destroying your own country. And so this is with China. Let's keep this aside. Now let's focus on Europe. For India, our policy between Russia and China has always been divide and rule. We never want Russia and China to come together ever. We went on for the last 20 years telling the Americans and Europeans, you're unnecessarily provoking Russia. You're pushing Russia into Chinese hands. They never listened to us. And finally, when it came true, they then turned it around on us and said, you're supporting aggression. We should have turned around very aggressively and said, fuckers, we told you. Stop pushing them, stop pushing them, stop pushing them. You didn't listen, fuck you. Instead of taking the morally arrogant stance, we were like, oh, okay, sorry, there's too much pressure, whatever nonsense. Anyway, what Trump is doing now, if it ends up in a US-American in a US-Russian alliance, not immediately, over a course of time to contain China, it will be India's wet dream come true. Literally. We'll be jizzing in our pants. Nothing suits us better than Russia and America coming together. Okay, because then China faces a real threat. The problem is, the big threat for Europe as they see it of their own creation is Russia. Who's the only country on Russia's periphery that can control Russia? China. So then Europe starts aligning with China. This is where between us and the Americans, we need to play divide and rule with Europe very, very carefully. We need to break up European cohesion. If anything, I would say we need to be more dependent on France, buy 50% of their nuclear company, Areva, buy 50% of DCNS, their naval company, buy 50% shares of as many Swedish and French defense assets, at least French defense assets, so that France's diffidence, as it's called, autosuffisance, strategic ambiguity, gets heightened. They feel they've got another partner, and we sell our influence in Moscow as a moderating influence. We need to start picking European countries, choosing European countries, and wean them away. We don't have the industrial strength or the wealth to do it. That is the problem. So it's a pipe dream. This is not the time. Europe will try to unite. We must do everything to break up Europe.
Because they have...
If we do not collectively, Europe will get behind China. That's not good for us.
Not at all.
थैंक यू सो मच दोस्तों, आपने अभी तक ये क्लिप देखी, लेकिन अगर आप पूरी वीडियो देखना चाहते हैं तो उसकी डिटेल्स डिस्क्रिप्शन बॉक्स में भी है और पिन कमेंट में भी है और आपके स्क्रीन पे भी फ्लैश करेगी। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।